I've always looked up to my father, Ryan. He's a well-respected businessman who seemed to have it all: success, wealth, and a family that adored him. I grew up watching my parents, Ryan and Emma, living what looked like an idyllic life. My younger sister, Sally, and I had an enviable childhood, filled with opportunities, love, and care. It wasn't until I moved out to start my own life as a journalist that I began to understand how fragile the balance of my family truly was. My father and I always had a close relationship, though I sometimes felt the weight of his expectations. He never said it outright, but it was clear that being the eldest son came with certain unspoken responsibilities. When I started dating Anna, I couldn't wait to introduce her to my parents. She was different, mysterious, captivating, and had a way of seeing through me that no one else could. I thought they'd be happy for me, and for a while, it seemed that way. The first time my father met Anna was at a party I had brought her to. I remember how the air between them seemed to change, just slightly, like the calm before a storm. She introduced herself confidently, locking eyes with him for what felt like an eternity. Dad was polite, as always, but there was something in the way he spoke to her, a mix of curiosity and an unspoken tension. I brushed it off at the time, convinced it was all in my head. How could I have known then what was really happening? A few weeks later, I brought Anna home to meet my parents officially. They welcomed her, as I expected, and my sister adored her instantly. Everything seemed perfect, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between my father and Anna. I could see it in their conversations, the way they exchanged glances when they thought no one was looking. It gnawed at me, but I buried the thought, telling myself that I was imagining things. It wasn't long after that when everything began to unravel. Anna and I had been dating for several months when one evening, she casually mentioned that she had reached out to my father. Just to ask him something about his business, she said with that same calm smile she always wore. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the days went on, I realized she was hiding more than she was telling me. My father had always been private, and suddenly, the idea of him having secret conversations with my girlfriend didn't sit right with me. And then it happened. Late one evening, when I was out on assignment for work, Anna called my father directly and asked him to come over. What began as a simple attraction, a few stolen glances, quickly spiraled into something much darker. Their affair started that night, and while I had no idea at the time, that was the beginning of the end for everything we held dear as a family. Part 2, The Affair Begins. It was a rainy Thursday evening when I came home after a long day of work. Anna was unusually quiet, more so than usual, though I had grown accustomed to her reserved nature. She sat by the window, watching the rain fall in rhythmic patterns, lost in her own thoughts. I asked her if everything was all right, but she only nodded and gave me a faint smile. That's when I should have noticed something was off. But I was too tired, too wrapped up in my own life to see the cracks forming. A week later, my father called. His voice was strained, as if he was holding something back. He mentioned a work event and asked if Anna and I would like to attend. It wasn't unusual for my father to invite us to these things, but this time, something felt different. Anna seemed almost too eager to accept. She picked out a dress that I hadn't seen her wear before, a deep shade of red, one that caught my attention immediately. At the event, I watched as my father and Anna exchanged pleasantries, their smiles a bit too warm, their laughter a bit too shared. I pushed the thought out of my mind, trying to convince myself that my father was just being friendly. But as the evening went on, I couldn't help but notice how Anna's attention was drawn to him in ways I hadn't seen before. The tension grew in the weeks that followed. I'd catch Anna staring off into space, her phone screen dimmed in her hand, as if she were waiting for something, or someone. When I asked, she'd always brush me off with a vague excuse. My suspicions started to get the better of me. I tried telling myself that I was being paranoid, that I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew something was going on. I just didn't want to admit it. It wasn't until I overheard a phone call late one night that my fears were confirmed. I had come home earlier than expected, the lights in our apartment dim. Anna was in the bedroom, speaking softly into the phone. I stood in the hallway, frozen, as I listened to her talk. The words were vague, but the tone was unmistakable. It was my father. They were discussing something private, something I wasn't meant to hear. I confronted her the next morning, my heart racing. "Who were you on the phone with last night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled, cold, distant. "It was work," she said, her voice too calm. I knew she was lying, but I couldn't prove it. Not yet. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew. Anna was no longer the woman I had fallen in love with. She was slipping away from me, and I was powerless to stop it. My father, once my role model, became a stranger in my own eyes. I could feel the walls closing in, the secret between them tightening its grip on all of us. I didn't know how deep it would go, or how much it would destroy. But I was about to find out. Part 2, Unraveling. There's something terrifying about watching everything you thought was solid in your life begin to unravel. It happens slowly at first, like a crack in the glass that no one notices, until it's too late. I came home one evening, late as usual. Anna wasn't there. I found her phone on the kitchen counter, buzzing intermittently with notifications she hadn't checked. She never left her phone lying around. Something was wrong. The bathroom light was on, the door ajar. When I stepped closer, I noticed a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye. I pushed the door open, and there she was, Anna, sitting on the edge of the tub, staring blankly into space. She didn't even flinch when I called her name. Her eyes were glazed over, empty, as if she was miles away. "Anna," I said, trying to control the rising panic in my voice. "What's going on? Where have you been?" She didn't respond at first, just slowly turned her head towards me. The look on her face was cold, almost cruel. And then, without any warning, she started to laugh. It was low, almost guttural, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded, stepping closer, trying to pull her back from whatever dark place she had drifted to. But she shrugged me off, her laughter subsiding into a chilling silence. "You don't know, do you?" she whispered, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've always been blind. You never saw the truth." My heart pounded in my chest. "What are you talking about?" But she just stood up, walked past me as if I wasn't even there. She didn't explain, didn't give me the answers I desperately needed. She left me standing in the bathroom, cold sweat trickling down my back. I started seeing signs after that. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd suddenly become distant and withdrawn. But what unnerved me most was the look in her eyes. It wasn't the Anna I knew anymore. There was something malicious behind her gaze, something dark. I began to notice small things at first. Her keys, left on the kitchen counter for the first time in years, as if she was testing me to see if I'd look through them. Random bruises on her arms that she couldn't explain. And the way she flinched when I touched her, as if my presence was suddenly suffocating to her. The tension between us became unbearable. It felt like I was living with a stranger, someone who enjoyed watching me squirm, unraveling before her eyes. She played mind games, planting seeds of doubt in my mind, making me question my sanity. But then I found the first real piece of evidence. A text message, one she hadn't managed to delete in time. From a number I didn't recognize. "See you tonight. Same place." I confronted her immediately, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. But it wasn't the kind of fear that comes from being caught. No. It was something darker. Something more dangerous. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "You don't want to know." And that's when I knew, there was something much bigger going on. Something far more twisted than I could have ever imagined. She wasn't just seeing someone else. She was planning something that would destroy everything. As the days passed, I became more paranoid, more unhinged. Every move she made felt like a calculated step in some twisted game. The whispers on her phone at night, the strange men showing up outside our house, the way she'd disappear for hours without explanation. I was losing control, and she knew it. She fed off my fear, off my desperation, pushing me closer to the edge with each passing day. But I wasn't going to let her win. I couldn't. One night, I followed her. I knew I was taking a risk, but I couldn't sit back and watch her unravel our lives anymore. She drove to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people go when they want to disappear. I watched from the shadows as she met with a man, a stranger, someone I had never seen before. They talked briefly, their conversation tense. And then, without warning, they kissed, hungry, desperate. I felt my stomach churn as I realized the depth of her betrayal. But as I watched, I noticed something else, something far more sinister. This wasn't just an affair. This was a plan. A plan to destroy me. I didn't know how yet, but I could feel it in my bones. The way they looked at each other, the whispered conversations, the money exchanged between them, they were setting me up. And I had no idea what was coming next. Part 3, The Cracks in the Facade. As the days went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. Anna was pulling the strings, no doubt. But what was her ultimate goal? Why was she doing this, and what was she hiding? I started to replay every conversation we'd had over the past few weeks. At first, I told myself that it was paranoia, but the pieces just didn't fit together. Small things I hadn't noticed before now screamed at me. The way she always steered conversations away from her past. How she had a knack for avoiding direct questions. And the way her demeanor shifted whenever she was around my father. I had always chalked it up to her British upbringing, or maybe her reserved nature, but now, I wasn't so sure. I began to suspect that the man at the motel wasn't just some random stranger. It wasn't just another affair. There was a deeper connection, something more calculated. Anna had always been mysterious, but I had no idea how dark her secrets truly were. One night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the realization hit me like a freight train. What if this wasn't just about her and me? What if she was manipulating my entire family? My father had always been charismatic, a man with presence and power. But I noticed how Anna gravitated towards him, how their interactions seemed charged, in ways I couldn't quite explain. I tried to confront Anna the next morning, but she brushed me off with her usual charm. "You're overthinking it," she said, flashing me that smile that always made me second-guess myself. But this time, I wasn't buying it. I had to find out what she was hiding. That's when I started looking through her things. It felt wrong, violating her privacy like that, but I had no choice. There were letters, old photos, things that didn't add up. The further I dug, the more I realized that I didn't know her at all. Anna had built an entire life outside of me, outside of us. And slowly, I began to piece together the truth. One evening, I decided to take a closer look at her phone. She had always been careful to lock it, but she'd left it charging in the living room while she went out for a walk. My heart pounded as I opened her messages. There, in the middle of the string of mundane conversations, was a message from a number I didn't recognize. "I'll handle it. He won't see it coming." I felt the blood drain from my face. I scrolled up, desperate to make sense of it. There were other messages, coded in vague language, but the meaning was clear. Anna wasn't just hiding an affair. She was plotting something. And from the context, it was clear that he referred to me. As the days passed, I grew more suspicious of my father, Ryan. He had always been protective of Anna in a way that seemed almost inappropriate. I didn't want to believe that my own father could be involved, but the way he looked at her, the secretive glances they exchanged, it all started to make sense. I knew I had to confront him, but how could I accuse my father of something so horrific without any real proof? My mind raced with questions. Was Anna playing both of us? Or was my father complicit in whatever twisted game she was playing? I had no answers, just a growing sense of dread. That's when I decided to follow Anna again. I couldn't let her continue deceiving me, manipulating my family, and tearing everything apart. She left the house one evening, telling me she was meeting a friend. I didn't believe her. I grabbed my coat and tailed her from a safe distance. She drove to the same motel as before. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked a few blocks away and waited. But this time, something was different. The man from before wasn't there. Instead, it was my father. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They embraced, and the way they held each other told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just about me. Anna had been playing a far bigger game, and I was just collateral damage. I didn't confront them that night. I drove back home, my mind spinning with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and confusion. But I knew that I couldn't let this go on. Anna wasn't just tearing my family apart, she was putting me in danger. And now that I knew the truth, there was no going back. I had to decide my next move carefully. I couldn't let them know I was onto them. Not yet. I needed to gather more evidence, figure out what Anna's endgame was, and then confront them both when the time was right. But deep down, I feared that whatever plan Anna and my father had cooked up, it was already too late to stop it. Part 4, The Pieces Fall into Place. The drive home after seeing my father with Anna was a blur. My mind raced with a flood of emotions, betrayal, disgust, anger, and an overwhelming sadness that crushed me from the inside. The woman I had fallen for, the woman I thought I loved, was not only having an affair, but she had chosen my father. My own father. The two people I trusted most had been deceiving me in the most brutal way possible. I replayed the scene in my head over and over again. The way they held each other, the way they looked into each other's eyes. There was nothing casual about it. It was real, intimate, and undeniable. My stomach churned at the thought of them together, plotting behind my back, sharing secrets and desires. How long had it been going on? How could I have been so blind? Every emotion warred inside me. Rage, so thick and heavy, made my hands clench the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Sadness, sharp and hollow, ate away at my chest, threatening to crack me wide open. And confusion that made everything spin in a chaotic whirlwind. I couldn't understand why they would do this to me, and worse, why Anna would betray me with my own father. I had to find out. I needed answers. For the next few days, I couldn't bring myself to confront either of them. I wasn't ready. Instead, I focused on piecing everything together, on making sense of the tangled web of lies and betrayal that had become my life. I started keeping a closer eye on Anna and my father, watching for clues, any small detail that would give me more insight into their affair. I found myself sneaking around the house when Anna thought I wasn't paying attention, scrolling through her phone when she left it unattended, looking for anything that could confirm what I had seen. It felt dirty, like I was invading her privacy, but what else could I do? I needed to know the truth. And the truth was far worse than I ever imagined. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. The affair had been going on for months. There were emails between them, carefully hidden but not well enough. Intimate messages, stolen moments during family gatherings, secret meetings when Anna claimed she was out with friends. They had planned everything so meticulously, thinking they could keep me in the dark forever. They thought I was too trusting, too naive to notice the cracks in their story. I began to put a plan together. But every time I thought about confronting them, the anger and the pain paralyzed me. My father was a powerful man, both in business and within our family. He had always been the person I looked up to, the figure I wanted to emulate. And now, he was the person I despised most in the world. How could I face him, knowing what he had done? And then there was Anna. Beautiful, manipulative Anna. The woman who had swept into my life, seducing me with her charm and grace, only to rip everything apart. She was the perfect con artist, playing the devoted girlfriend while secretly weaving her web around my father. Did she ever truly love me? Or had I just been a stepping stone on her path to something more? Something darker. One evening, while Anna was out again, I decided to search through her belongings. I knew I needed solid evidence before I could confront them both, something undeniable that would force them to admit the truth. I opened her laptop, heart racing, fingers trembling as I scrolled through her recent files. That's when I found the folder. Hidden deep within the maze of her personal documents, it was labeled innocuously as work notes. But what I found inside wasn't work-related at all. There were photos, dozens of them, of Anna with my father. In some, they were laughing together, others were far more intimate, but they all told the same story. The affair wasn't just a brief fling, it was something deeper, something far more dangerous. There were also emails, carefully worded but full of underlying threats and plans. My father was clearly under Anna's spell, willing to do whatever she asked, even if it meant risking his marriage, his reputation, his family. And Anna, always one step ahead, had manipulated him with terrifying precision. She wasn't in love with him, she was using him. And I was nothing more than collateral damage. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that this wasn't just about an affair. Anna had a plan to destroy everything my father had built, and she didn't care who got hurt in the process. I saw messages about business deals, secret accounts, financial transactions that didn't add up. She was playing a long game, and it wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. But the worst part? My father didn't see it. He was blinded by his obsession with her, completely unaware that she was setting him up to fall. And if I didn't act fast, she would succeed. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of confronting them made my stomach churn. How could I face them both, knowing what I knew? How could I reveal the truth without destroying everything in the process? I had no idea what their reactions would be, but one thing was clear, this was going to end, one way or another. Part 5, The Breaking Point. The air around me felt thick, suffocating, as if the weight of the truth I now held had drained all the oxygen from the room. Anna was more than just a liar. She was dangerous, cunning, and manipulative beyond anything I could have imagined. The deeper I delved into her secret life, the clearer it became that her plan wasn't just to tear apart my father and our family, it was to erase us entirely. Days passed, and I played along as if nothing had changed. But inside, the anger and betrayal festered like an infection. I couldn't bear to look at my father. Every word that came out of his mouth grated on me, reminding me of his weakness, his blindness to what was really happening. How could he not see her for what she truly was? Anna continued her charade, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't ensnared my father in her twisted game. She smiled at me like she always had, played the role of the perfect girlfriend, even though I now knew the truth. She thought she had won. She thought I would never figure it out. But she underestimated me. The confrontation, when it finally came, was unplanned. It was a quiet evening. My father had gone out on one of his business trips, and Anna had stayed over at my place. We sat on the couch, the tension between us thick, her presence suffocating. Every minute with her was a battle to keep from lashing out. But that night, something inside me snapped. "What are you doing, Anna?" I asked, my voice cold, almost detached. She looked up from her phone, surprised at the sudden shift in my tone. "What do you mean?" she replied, feigning innocence. "You think I'm a fool, don't you?" I said, my eyes locked onto hers, my pulse racing. "You think I haven't figured it out?" Anna's expression remained unreadable for a moment, but then something flickered in her eyes, something dark, something calculating. She didn't respond immediately, and the silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. "What are you talking about, Martin?" she finally asked, her voice low, almost daring me to say it out loud. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to control the rage building inside me. "The affair, Anna. You and my father. I know everything." For a brief second, her face betrayed her surprise. But just as quickly, it hardened into something cold and emotionless. She didn't deny it. Instead, she stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, and faced me. "And what if you do?" she asked, her voice soft, almost mocking. "What are you going to do about it?" Her lack of remorse, her audacity, stunned me. How could she be so heartless, so calculated? "You've been playing us both," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "What's the endgame here, Anna? Was this your plan all along? To ruin us?" A small, cruel smile curled at the corners of her mouth. "Your father was easy. He practically threw himself at me," she said, her tone icy. "And you, well, you were just convenient." Her words cut deep, slicing through whatever remnants of affection I had left for her. My hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I took a step back, struggling to keep control. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why do this? Why tear everything apart?" Anna walked toward me, closing the distance between us, her gaze piercing. "Because I can," she said simply. "Because your father is a fool. And because you're nothing to me, Martin. You never were." The cruelty in her words was unbearable, but there was something else, something I hadn't seen before. Beneath the surface, behind the cold facade, there was a darkness in Anna, a hunger for power and control that I hadn't understood until now. And I realized, in that moment, that she wasn't just trying to destroy our family. She was trying to destroy us all, me, my father, everyone. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place, but the picture they formed was one of devastation and ruin. Anna had seduced my father, and now she was using him, manipulating him, twisting him into something he wasn't. And my father, blinded by his obsession, was willing to do anything for her. I had to act. But I couldn't confront them both directly, not yet. I needed more time, more leverage. I needed to find a way to end this, to stop Anna before she destroyed everything I cared about. But I also knew that time was running out. The longer I waited, the more dangerous the game became. And Anna wasn't going to wait for me to figure it all out. The tension between us reached its breaking point that night. I watched as Anna left my apartment, her steps slow, almost deliberate, as if she knew the power she still held over me. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't going to let her win. As soon as the door closed behind her, I made a decision. I was going to stop her, no matter what it took. Part 6, The Unraveling. As I pieced together the horrifying reality, a new wave of anger surged through me, not just toward Anna, but toward my father. He wasn't just a victim of her manipulations. No, he had willingly given in, allowed himself to be consumed by the lust and infatuation she stirred in him. His lust for Anna had blinded him, warped his judgment, and now he was nothing more than a pawn in her game. The father I once admired, the man who had been the foundation of our family, had fallen. He wasn't just cheating on my mother, he was betraying everything we stood for. And for what? For a woman who treated us all as disposable pieces in her twisted puzzle. That night, as I lay awake, my mind raced with dark thoughts. I couldn't just sit back and watch her destroy everything. I couldn't let her win. But I knew that taking Anna down meant being smarter than her. She was ruthless, calculating, and dangerously unpredictable. A direct confrontation wouldn't work. I had to play her game, but on my terms. Destroying Anna from the inside. The next morning, I started my plan. First, I had to gather every piece of evidence, every hint of her manipulation. I needed to expose her for what she really was, but I also needed leverage. I knew Anna was driven by power, and if I could take that away from her, she would fall. I began by carefully monitoring her every move. I tracked her social media, hacked into her messages, and set up cameras near my father's office. I wasn't sure how far things had gone between them, but I knew I had to catch them in the act. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence, it was maintaining the facade that I didn't know anything. Every time I saw her with my father, every time I heard her fake laugh as she charmed him, it took everything in me not to confront them. But my rage fueled my patience. I could wait. I could be cold, calculating, just like her. And while Anna played her twisted game, I built mine. Mistrust breeds paranoia. Soon, I began planting seeds of doubt. I started subtly manipulating my father's perception of Anna. During casual conversations, I'd drop hints about how shady she seemed, how she had too many secrets. I framed it as concern, making sure not to sound accusatory. And slowly, it worked. I could see the flicker of uncertainty in my father's eyes, the way he began to question Anna's motives, if only for a moment. But that wasn't enough. Anna had an iron grip on him, and I knew she wouldn't let go easily. A plan for revenge. My anger toward my father simmered beneath the surface. He had betrayed us all, chosen his own selfish desires over the family. And now, I wanted him to suffer. Not physically, but emotionally, to make him feel the same gut-wrenching pain I felt when I realized what he had done. But my mother and sister didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire. I had to protect them at all costs. I couldn't allow Anna's presence to ruin their lives the way it was ruining mine. My father's obsession with Anna had to end, and I had to be the one to end it. I began formulating a plan. It was risky, but if it worked, Anna would be exposed, and my father's world would come crashing down. The only way to break their twisted bond was to shatter the illusion Anna had created. I needed to pit them against each other, to plant a seed of doubt so powerful that it would consume them both. Part 7, The Dangerous Culmination. The last few weeks had felt like an intricate chess game, with every move carefully plotted, each one a step toward my final goal. I had to wait for the perfect moment, where every piece fell into place, where Anna and my father, blinded by their lust and selfish desires, would destroy each other without even realizing I was pulling the strings. Anna's seduction of my father had been going on for far too long. She played him like a violin, feeding off his weakness and his pathetic obsession. Every time I saw them together, the rage burned deeper, but I kept my calm. I knew that I had to be patient. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and everything would unravel. And I couldn't afford that. Setting the trap. It started with a subtle suggestion to my father. I knew his obsession with Anna had pushed him to dangerous extremes, and I wanted to make sure it would lead him to his own downfall. One night, I casually mentioned a secluded cabin my friend's family owned up in the mountains. I told him it was the perfect place for a quiet getaway, a place where no one would bother him. The way his eyes lit up, I knew I had planted the seed in his mind. He would take Anna there. It was only a matter of time. What neither of them knew was that I had already been there. I had prepared everything, the hidden cameras, the carefully placed evidence of their affair. I was building the perfect storm, one where they could no longer hide in the shadows. A week later, my father, eager to please Anna, invited her to the cabin. He was under the impression that it would be their secret sanctuary, away from the prying eyes of my mother and anyone else who might discover their betrayal. He had no idea that I was 3 steps ahead of him. While my father was packing for the weekend, I casually asked about his plans. He lied, of course, saying he had a business trip. The anger simmered in me, but I played the part of the ignorant son, smiling and wishing him a safe trip. My father and Anna left for the cabin the next morning, completely unaware that I had followed them. I watched from a distance as they entered the cabin, laughing and holding hands, oblivious to the storm that was about to crash down on them. I had already set the cameras to record every moment of their time together. I wasn't planning to expose them immediately. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment, when the stakes were highest, when they both thought they had gotten away with everything. And that moment came quicker than I expected. The confrontation. Late that night, as they lay together in bed, I sent the first video to my father's phone. A clip of them entering the cabin, holding hands, laughing. He froze, staring at the screen, and I could see the panic spreading across his face. He showed it to Anna, who immediately understood what was happening. Her eyes flashed with anger, but also fear. She knew someone had been watching. They scrambled to get dressed, but before they could leave the cabin, I was already there, standing at the door, waiting. Going somewhere? I asked, my voice calm but cold. The look of shock on their faces was priceless. My father stammered, trying to explain, but the words wouldn't come out. Anna, on the other hand, tried to play it cool, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew her game was over. I know everything, I said, stepping closer. I've known for weeks. My father's face crumbled, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Anna, ever the manipulator, tried to turn the situation to her advantage, claiming that it was all a mistake, that she and my father had never meant to hurt anyone. But I wasn't interested in their excuses. I had all the evidence I needed, and I was ready to destroy them both. The final twist. What neither of them knew was that I had already sent the videos to my mother. She had been watching everything from the safety of our home. And now, as my father stood there, broken and ashamed, he received a call from her. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply told him that she knew everything, that their marriage was over, and that he would never see her or Sally again. The weight of his betrayal crashed down on him, and for the first time, I saw the man who had once been so strong crumble into nothing. Anna, realizing that she had lost her control over both of us, tried one last desperate attempt to seduce me, to turn me against my father and make me her new puppet. But I saw through her lies. I'm not like him, I said, stepping back. You don't control me. And with that, I left them both in the cabin, their perfect little world shattered. The plan comes together. As I drove away, I felt a sense of satisfaction. My father had destroyed everything for Anna, and now he had nothing left. Anna, the manipulator, had lost everything as well. I had taken back control of my life, and though the cost had been high, it was worth it. My mother and Sally would be safe now. I would make sure of it. And as for my father and Anna, they would have to live with the consequences of their choices. The pieces of the puzzle had finally come together, and the game was over.
What do you think about this story? Write in comments. If you don't follow our channel Cheating Room, you will probably never hear from us again. If you are subscribed, congratulations, you will not miss any exciting story. Thank you for listening to this shocking story with us. See you again.